Okay, so we're going to talk about crank no start and directional and pinpoint testing and some diagnostic techniques. So, as far as a crank no start, it means your motor is going to turn over. So it's activating the starter, but it's not going to start. It could be anything from the fuel system. It could be the ignition. It could be it's not getting compression. It could be the intake system. Uh, you know, Directional testing would be kind of the general area that the system's in. So if I turned the car on and I wanted to listen to the fuel pump activating, and it didn't activate, then I would know that it's somewhere in the fuel pump circuit, essentially. So that would be more directional testing, or if I had no spark, that would be in the direction of the ignition system. Pinpoint testing would be specifically, like if you're going in and you find out it's centered around the ignition coil that the problem lays at, or if it's at the fuel pump itself. Some diagnostic techniques, you could be pulling trouble codes, you can hook up the scan tool, you check for spark, check the fuel rail, the pump, as I said before. And if you don't hear one of those things, and it doesn't have to be just with the engine itself, it can be for something like the washer pump or the windshield wipers or something like that. Say if you can't hear the pump, then you know the problem is in the fuel pump circuit. So you go to the circuit and you test it, and then that's pinpoint testing. So you've gone from directional to pinpoint. And so yeah, those are. I mean, there's can be multiple reasons that things don't work on the vehicle. It could be bad grounds, it could be no communication, it could be just old, it could be worn out. There's many reasons. But directional and pinpoint testing is essential because it'll get you to where you need to go to fix the problem. Okay, so as far as diagnostic trouble codes go, this car isn't actually an OB1 or OBD one. So it's pre-1996. 96 and up, they had OBD2. But on these ones, you want to check the service manual and you want to see how to check all the sensors, make sure that the computer is sending out information like it's supposed to. It's very simple. You can't quite hook up a scan tool to it, but you can always look in the service manual. Okay, so another thing you can do is you can check the RPM gauge and see if it moves during cranking. If it does, it means the crank position sensor is working. The crank position sensor is going to send a signal to the RPM gauge at any time the motor is turning over. So if we try and crank it here, well, we're not getting anything right now, but a couple minutes ago I did try and start it and the RPM gauge did not move. Some cars, the crank sensor doesn't quite work that way. It'll still send a signal to the RPM gauge, but during cranking, it will not cause the gauge to move. Only when it's running, it'll move. On some of the, I know Ford trucks and SUVs had that in the 90s, where the RPM gauge wouldn't move until the car was started, so there was a delay. Okay, so Okay, so we can also check with starter fluid. We got a little can here, and if it starts with the starter fluid during cranking, then that means it's not a fuel issue. So we're gonna try and start it here. Crank it. Alright, so it's not starting, so obviously there's a fuel delivery issue. Last thing, you can check the fuel pump. I checked it already, and I didn't hear it operate at all. So it's most likely a fuel delivery issue. Somewhere in the fuel circuit, there's an issue. So we'll look up the diagrams and get that fixed. Okay, so we're going to check for spark really quick here, see if it's an ignition issue. Alright, so he's going to go ahead and crank it, and then I'm going to use the screwdriver. We're going to see if we got spark coming from here. Alright, go ahead. Alright, stop. Okay, so there's no spark. You would definitely be able to see it, and you would hear it too.